Warning in a video posted on his Truth Social platform that combat operations in Iran will continue until all objectives are achieved, and he said it is likely there will be more American casualties. Well, the Prime Minister here says he has given the US permission to use British bases for defensive purposes. In a statement, the Prime Minister said the decision would help protect British lives.
We have British jets in the air as part of coordinated defensive operations, which have already successfully intercepted Iranian strikes. But the only way to stop the threat is to destroy the missiles at source, in their storage depots, or the launchers which are used to fire the missiles. The United States has requested permission to use British bases for that specific and limited defensive purpose. We have taken the decision to accept this request to prevent Iran firing missiles across the region, killing innocent civilians.
Keir Starmer speaking a short time ago. As you can see, our chief political correspondent John Craig was listening to that. And John, we have just heard in the last few moments that Sky News understands the UK has given the US access now to use the Diego Garcia and RAF Fairford military bases.
These were the ones that the Americans asked for, so it's no surprise that it's those two. Ironic, some will say, that at a time of great political controversy over the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia, that is now going to feature in this military operation. That was part of a statement from the Prime Minister, and he talked about how things have changed, and that's why the government's decision about those bases has changed. Now, he talked about, he said that the Iranians have hit airports and hotels where British citizens are staying. He said this is clearly a dangerous situation. He said that we have at least 200,000 British citizens in the region, residents, families on holiday and those in transit. And he talks about the Foreign Office travel advice and so on. He says it's a deeply worrying time. We'll do all we can to support you. He says the armed forces who are located across the region are also being put at risk by Iran's actions. He said, yesterday Iran hit a military base in Bahrain, narrowly missing British personnel. He said that the death of the Supreme Leader will not stop Iran from launching these strikes. The approach is becoming even more reckless and more dangerous to civilians. Now, he said, our decision, that's the previous decision, that the UK would not be involved with the strikes on Iran was deliberate. Not least because we believe the best way forward for the region and the world is a negotiated settlement where Iran agrees to give up any aspirations to develop a nuclear weapon. And then he said, but Iran is striking British interests and putting British people at huge risk along with our allies across the region. And then he said, our partners in the Gulf have asked us to do more to defend them, and it's my duty to protect British lives. Now, what he meant by that is that the Prime Minister has had numerous phone calls today, during the course of today, with a number of significant leaders in the region. 1, the King of Bahrain. 2, the Crown Prince of Kuwait. 3, the King of Jordan. 4, the President of Cyprus. And 5, the Sultan of Oman. Now, later on in his statement, he goes on to say about international law. He said the decision that's just been announced is in accordance with international law. We are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We're not joining these strikes. We'll continue with our defensive actions in the region. Now, I want to, then he went on to say, here's a bit of politics, we all remember the mistakes of Iraq. We have learned those lessons. We were not involved in the initial strikes on Iran, and we'll not join offensive action now. And he talks about Iran pursuing a scorched earth strategy. So we're supporting the collective self-defense of our allies. That's our duty to the British people. And he says, this is the British government protecting British interests and British lives. Now, let me tell you about that legal advice. that's just been published by the government, as the Prime Minister says. He talks about condemning Iran's reckless and ongoing attacks, but then he says, as well as defending itself and its position in the region, the UK is acting in the collective, this is the legal advice, the collective self-defence of regional allies who have requested support. The UK and its allies are permitted under international law to use or support force in such circumstances where acting in self-defence is the only feasible means to deal with an ongoing armed attack and where the force used is necessary and proportionate. And then he just goes, I'll be as brief as I can. The UK has military assets flying in the region to intercept drones or missiles. In addition, he talks about the UK has responded to US requests, facilitate specific and limited defence action against missile facilities in Iran, which were involved in launching strikes at regional allies.
I mean, when it comes, John, to this news about the UK military bases, will some accuse him of another U-turn?
No doubt, because it is a change, and obviously, only as yesterday, of course, he talked about the UK not taking support, lending support in that way. Now he will argue that things have changed. In fact, he is arguing that because, of course, he's talked about British people being almost hit in Bahrain. There was a hotel in Dubai and so on. So what has changed, he is arguing, is that British people are now under attack. And that's why he's made this decision. Now, I should add that one other piece of news from Downing Street. Number 10 have published a joint E3 leaders statement on Iran, talking about the indiscriminate and disproportionate missile attacks against countries in the region, including those who are not involved in initial US and Israeli military operations. He says Iran's reckless, this says the statement of the three leaders, that's the Prime Minister, President Macron, Chancellor Merz of Germany. Iran's reckless attacks have targeted our close allies, are threatening our service personnel and our civilians across the region. So that's a statement by the three leaders. But yes, politically, the Prime Minister he will argue, been forced to act because British civilians, British interests are at risk, and that's why there's been the change in the government's position. Now, it is almost certain that there will be a government statement in the Commons tomorrow on this, either by the PM or by the Foreign Secretary. There will be those on the left. One thinks of Jeremy Corbyn and his allies amongst the independent MPs, who will say this is wrong, we shouldn't be doing this. However, the government's opponents from the Tories and Reform UK have said we should have been doing this initially. So either the PM or the Foreign Secretary, whoever makes the common statement, will have to justify that. And of course, that will come on a day when a Green MP, Hannah Spencer, has been elected on a very strong anti-war platform. So the Prime Minister or the Foreign Secretary will have to justify all this to critics on the left and those on the right. Those on the left who say we shouldn't be letting the Americans use these bases, and those opponents who say, like, for example, Kemi Badenoch, Priti Patel for the Tories, and Nigel Farage for Reform UK, who said we should have let the Americans use our bases straight away. But this is a pretty momentous decision. The Prime Minister acknowledges how controversial it is. He said we haven't forgotten Iraq, we've learned the lessons, and so, I mean, that is the big worry for any Labour leader, of course. After Iraq, the whole horrible memory of Iraq, and the Prime Minister has said, he says, we all remember the mistakes of Iraq. We have learned those lessons. So he's learned the lessons, he says, but UK is embarking now on a mission really stepping up the British involvement here in this Middle East conflict. There will be those who very much welcome the action that he's announced tonight, but there will be those who have misgivings, and there will be those on the left who will, including some in Sir Keir Starmer's own party, left-wing MPs